Welcome to the Ad Nauseum Podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, listeners, to episode 136 of the Ad Nauseum Podcast. My name has not changed. It is still the same. It is Dr. David C. as in curmudgeon Noe.
Oh, man.
And I am here. It's not your turn yet,
Sorry.
Jeff.
Okay, gotcha.
Shall I start over?
I got you, C.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm here on a somewhat blustery December evening in the basement of the RHB bookstore, which we call The Bunker Vomitorium South, with my good friend and tremendous co-host, Dr. Jeffrey T. as in...
What do you got? Touchy.
Winkle.
Wow, man.
How are you doing tonight, Jeff?
I'm doing okay. I'm more worried about you now. I mean, when we came down into the bunker, I didn't know it was going to be this bad, but you're feeling curmudgeonly?
I'm feeling kind of curmudgeonly. Okay. Well, when we got into the cage, and pulled the door shut and pushed the little button and descended 4,000 feet.
Right.
Down, passing dead canary after dead canary.
Exactly, and it's getting colder and
That's
colder.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, who can endure that?
That's true. That's true. That's always a big
Cut me some slack,
right,
man.
So, well, I mean, to counter your...
Yes. Varsity Blues?
Exactly. I'm not feeling all that touchy tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, so...
You're never touchy.
I'm feeling good from a mental and philosophical and spiritual standpoint.
Yes.
I'm at the tail end of an illness. Maybe the listeners can hear that in my voice a little bit. But I'm hopefully...
I can see it in your eyes.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yes. But hopefully that's on its way out. So all things considered, I'm doing all right.
That's great. So the T stands for even keeled.
Even what? Where's the T there?
It's at the end of the keel.
Gotcha.
All right. This is episode 136. Jeff, what are we talking about tonight?
Dave, I'm excited about tonight. This is one of my favorite topics. I know Dave is rolling his eyes at the other end of the table, but we're talking about urban legends.
Yes.
We're talking about kind of narrative archetypes, and of course, a centering of perhaps my all-time favorite topic, liminality.
Liminality.
Yes.
So we're going to have an hour worth of liminality.
Well, it's not going to be all liminality, but there's going to be a heavy dollop of it.
Okay. I'm in for the dollop.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about creatures and places which inspire a sense of unease.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly right. And I'm hoping we can talk about any experience that you had with urban legends that you heard growing up.
Nope.
Not a one?
I lived in a rural environment. Are there such things as rural legends?
Yes, well, but most urban legends are rural. That's one of the weird ironies about this. All right. But
I'm eager to get into this.
We can come back to that.
Sort of.
That topic. Yeah.
I mean, I knew characters like the abdominal snowman.
Yeah.
Right, who lives off in the Himalayas.
Right, he's always doing crunches.
That's right. Or for those who are eschatologically inclined, there's the already but not yeti.
Yeah.
Do you get the eschatology reference? You remember back at that institution where we used to study and teach?
Yes.
They were always talking about, we live in the time. This is a theological point, so bear with me, listeners not interested in theology. There's a good pun at the end, I think.
Okay.
They would say, we live in that time when the victory over the forces of evil the victory has been gained.
Yeah.
But it's not complete yet. It's like the D-Day, they land at D-Day, the war's over, but there's mop-up. They call that the already but not yet.
Gotcha.
That's the, to my mind, cutesy catchphrase that has taken over the discussion of eschatology.
So you were talking about the already but not yeti.
Already but not yeti. That's right. So you're waiting for the monster to appear, but he's not there.
He's not there yet.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Are we going to be talking maybe about the Bigfoot character? The one who invented those transparent Swiss watches in the 1980s that were so popular?
Oh, the Sasquatch?
That's right. You know about this the Sasquatch,
I do know
don't
the
you?
Sasquatch. Those big hairy guys, but had those fashionable watches with little rubber bands on them.
Did you ever own one of those?
I never did.
Really?
I knew all the kids at school had them. I may have wanted one, but I never had a Swatch.
You suffered from Swatch envy then.
I did. Did you have a Swatch?
You just swatched others enjoying themselves.
All right, man.
Yes, I did have one.
You did have one. Oh,
I
man.
got it at the thrift store.
Nice.
So I had the best of all possible worlds.
Was this recently?
No. This is 25 years ago.
Okay, all right.
I was an undergrad.
Yeah.
I was briefly hip, and I didn't have to pay much for it.
That's perfect.
So
That's
these kinds
worlds.
of monsters, the Sasquatch and the Loch Ness Monster and so forth.
Yeah.
These are liminal characters, right?
They are. They're not really the kind that I'm talking about tonight, though. So the kind of my thesis is kind of more centered around monsters that are associated with particular locations. I guess Loch Ness would be that.
Yes.
Sasquatch is more kind of a moving monster. You can find the Yeti in many different places, but I'm talking about particular kind of creatures or monsters that are associated with specific geographical spots, and those spots very often tend to be liminal.
Like the Himalayan mountains?
Well, again, it's too big. I'm talking about like a small town or that bridge on that side of town.
Okay.
That's what I'm talking about.
Do you think the Loch Ness Monster would be as scary if the name associated with it weren't so impressive?
You mean what, Nessie?
I don't know. No, the Loch Ness.
Loch Ness?
There's something evocative and misty and mysterious about that.
Right, well, absolutely.
If the monster were named, something less interesting, like the Turn Left Monster, right? Or the,
much less foreboding.
the Signpost Monster.
Right.
It wouldn't be really interesting.
I always wanted to go to Loch Ness.
I have wanted to also.
Right. I have been to Edinburgh, but
Yes.
that's my Scottish experience.
Well, that's where the Firth of Forth is, remember?
That's right. Right.
Bordeaux Trio. We talked about the Firth of Forth
We did.
on some previous episode. I can't remember which one.
I did, but I imagine Loch Ness to be kind of a remote, kind of
Correct.
misty, rainy, windy Scottish location.
Yes, lots of bog, lots of peat.
Lots of bog.
We have some Scottish listeners.
Oh, yes, we do.
Yop Jacobs, remember
Right.
Yop?
Yeah, I do remember Yop.
And we gave a shout out to him and to his wife and daughter, and they had some cogent criticisms of our Scottish accents.
That's right. Exactly.
So we'll leave that off the table.
It still stings.
Yes.
But I would love to hear if Yop's been up to Loch Ness.
That's right.
Yeah,
so we have a shout out, don't we?
we do. And this goes out to one Sam Ayung. I remember Sam.
I do too.
Yep.
Brilliant student.
Yes, a really good student. And I think he was a student of us both.
That's correct.
Right. So
Not at the same time.
No. He said he grew up in Colorado and began his mathematics studies at Calvin College. And after 3 years having experienced Dr. Winkle's classical mythology class, that's where I remember him from, Sam felt that his education would be greatly enriched by philosophy and classics. So he enrolled in Dr. Noe's Intro Latin and Homeric Greek class.
Those are two separate classes.
Yes.
The Intro Latin and then the Homeric Greek.
It wasn't a combo deal.
No, it was not.
Right.
No one supersized.
Right. Pick it up there, Dave.
He says, Sam says, I was astonished and happily fell in love with the spoken Latin and the metrical recitation of the Iliad. Now, I got to teach Sam and one other student, a young woman named Nell. I got to teach.
I remember Nell.
Of course you remember Nell. She went to Italy with us.
That's right.
Yep. And those two were just a fantastic Greek class. I got to teach Homer to two really fine students. That was a lot of fun.
I could imagine both of them doing really well.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Sam left the institution with math, philosophy, and Greek majors, and then entered a math doctorate program where he studied geometry and topology. You study any topology?
I never, aside from like the toppings that I would put on my ice cream.
More of a middle or bottomology?
Right.
Both words with Greek origin. Good job, Sam. Sam is now a visiting assistant math professor at Trinity College. His days are mostly filled with teaching math, and he's very grateful for this podcast as a way to engage with history, culture, language, narrative, and much else.
It's so good to hear from
That's
him.
very kind. Thank
Very
you,
cool.
Sam.
Excellent.
Thanks for listening. So, Jeff.
Yeah.
As we get into this, you have for us an opening quote, do you not?
I do. And I chose this one for a number of reasons. One, I think it illustrates, it gives kind of a sense of where we're going. But also it deals with a famous urban legend from Iowa City.
Yes, my old stomping grounds.
Yes, and mine as well to a lesser degree.
What?
So yes, when I was in graduate school at Northwestern, I dated a lovely young woman who grew up in Iowa City and had occasion to go over and visit
Interesting.
her family there on a number of occasions.
I don't remember that.
I maybe I haven't. Well, I don't know if we've talked about this, but
Boy, I'm learning so much about you, Winkle.
so I spent a lot of time in Iowa City, and in fact, I heard about this urban legend originally from my girlfriend at the time.
Interesting. Now, I was in Iowa City, but never heard of this.
You never
urban
heard this
legend.
one?
No.
Well, this comes from an article called Playing with Fear, Interpreting the Adolescent Legend Trip by one S. Elizabeth Bird from a journal called Western Folklore from way back in 1994.
Interesting. July 1994. Western Folklore. Are you a regular reader, subscriber of Western Folklore?
I am neither of those things.
Okay.
But every once in a while, I will kind of dip my toes into an article from journals like this.
Right.
Yep. So this begins. In 1924, Teresa Feldevert died in Iowa City, Iowa. More than 60 years later, her grave is a site for beer bashes and Halloween pilgrimages, where adolescents meet to share stories, superstitions, and fears, and to act them out in games that try to tempt fate. The legend trip, as it has become known by folklorists,
That's a tough one.
is a widespread phenomenon. Many communities have their haunted houses, spooky bridges, or other sites where adolescents drive on dark nights so they can terrify themselves and live to tell about it. As its name suggests, the legend trip centers around stories or legends shared among people who travel to a particular place. The legends surrounding it are often disseminated actually at the site, such as the legend of Iowa City's Black Angel, the grave of the Feldovert family. From an analysis of the text in the context of the Black Angel legend, I aim to show how the site is used to play out the values, fears, and concerns of those who perpetuate the traditions, which is something I aim to do with the legend that I've chosen to focus upon. Right?
Okay.
So you had not heard
for this evening.
For this evening, yes. So you have not heard of you never heard of the Black Angel?
No, Teresa Feldovert and the Black Angel.
Right.
When I was in Iowa City, Jeff,
Yes.
I was busy earning an advanced degree in classics.
Oh, so you had no time for such silliness.
No shenanigans, parfaits on the Commons lawn,
Right.
It was all parfaits and deep dives into Lucan and Sallust and Plato and so forth.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, I went down to this graveyard.
Okay.
And
the Black Angel graveyard?
Yeah, so it's this large kind of foreboding sculpture on top of a grave. And I forget what the geological makeup of it, but it's the stone or the metal has oxidized over time. And so what was once bright white has now turned completely black.
Oh.
And it stands out in this field of, otherwise, gray and white marble stones.
Right.
And it's this weeping angel whose head is bowed and the one wing is covering it, and it looms over whoever kind of stands near it. And so at a glance you can see, okay, that's a bit unsettling. And so what I learned is that local high school students or junior high kids will go out there around midnight and they will dare each other to kind of hop the fence of the graveyard, and they're supposed to go and they run around it 3 times, and there's various things that are supposed to happen if you do it right and if you do it wrong. And so I've always been fascinated.
Did you wait until midnight and go out and join the young 6th and 7th graders?
I did not. I went there in the bright light of day, and it was odd enough in the bright light of day. So yeah.
So maybe this person, Teresa Feldovert, 1924.
Yeah.
Maybe she died young.
I think that's actually part of it. That's often how these stories go.
And that's why the angel, had his head down and was weeping.
Right.
Taken too young.
Taken too young. I think that is actually part of the story. Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. So Dave.
Yes.
Let me say a little bit about kind of where the spark for kind of this fascination came from.
Okay.
So I'll say I've always been interested in these kinds of oddball urban legends, and I grew up with a number of them from Jenison, Hudsonville, where I grew up just down the road from here,
which is just a little bit west of the sprawling metropolis of Grand Rapids.
Yes, exactly. And I was always interested in them, but never thought much about them. After I outgrew my adolescent fascination with them, but. A number of years ago, I moved to Holland, Michigan, after I finished my degree at Northwestern, and I got married to Beck, and she was teaching at a local high school in Holland, and she came home, and she was talking about how all her students were talking about this urban legend of the melon heads.
The melon heads.
And you ever heard of this one?
Those are the delicious little candies that come in the box, is that right?
If only it was that delicious.
Oh, those are the
lemon heads.
Lemon heads.
Yes, right. So we're talking about the melon heads.
Transposing a consonant or two.
Yes.
I don't know the melon heads.
Right, and nor should
they
you.
Like the Smashing Pumpkins?
Oh, that would be a great name for a band.
Yes.
Right? But apparently it's this, the melon heads are kind of a mutant family who, with kind of megalocephaloid, large, oversized heads, that haunt the woods of Saugatuck, Holland area.
Really?
And so the kids were telling these stories about one of the things they would do in middle school was to go out there late at night and go into the woods and tell these stories and freak each other out that this mutant family was going to come and devour them. And what fascinated me about it was that I grew up in Jenison, which is maybe a half hour from Holland.
Safe. Beyond the reach of the melon heads.
Beyond the reach of the melon
heads. Because their heads are large, but their feet and other body parts are normal size, so they don't travel.
True, exactly. So, yes, physically safe, but what really struck me was that as a kid who was very interested in those kinds of things, I had never heard that legend before. And so, I started to really think about how these urban legends, they pop up in a particular geographical location. All the kids in that area know the story. But once you step just a little bit outside of that community, nobody knows the story.
This is in the age before internet, though.
Right.
And the Blair Witch Project.
Yes, exactly. Right. So, I mean, since the internet, it's a completely different game now.
All bets are off.
Right. And, for people like me who are interested in studying them, it's a great gift because now you can kind of find out any legend that's out there.
You don't have to be a part of the community to learn its local liminal legends.
Right. Right. But perhaps, still part of the community to participate in these kinds of things. So growing up, you never did the dare of going into the cemetery at midnight or anything like that?
I was trying to think as you were asking me.
Yeah.
So near where I grew up, Orleans Cemetery.
Okay.
There was one little family memorial called the Greenup Memorial. It's still there. I doubt any Greenups are listening, but if they are, no offense, Greenup family.
Yeah.
And it was a stone building, kind of. And there was no group effort involved in this. This was just my riding my bicycle by.
Okay.
So frequently from my parents' home to that of a near relative, and thinking, why is that building like that, and why are there bars on the window? Because, of course, my imagination filled in all the gaps. There's dead people on the inside.
Right.
But why the bars on the window?
Are they trying to get out?
Is someone trying to get in or is someone trying to get out?
Yeah.
That's probably the closest that we would get to this notion of urban legend.
Gotcha.
But I had constant fears, of living out in a rural setting where it's very dark at night and, one's job, I'm speaking about some young child, that young child's job may have been to take the trash out after dark. And so, those things.
Right.
It's not an urban legend, but I'm sure there was something out there that was after me.
Sure. I mean, I think all those kind of fears are rooted in these stories are kind of rooted in that same kind of idea. I remember being at summer camp, and having to go leave the cabin to go down to the bathhouse in the middle of the night.
Oh, yeah.
I was convinced, okay, I'm never coming back.
That's right.
That was a death march. Right.
Someone's going to get my sleeping bag. That's okay.
Exactly. So that paradox that really kind of struck me as interesting is that, so these many American urban legends, most of the urban legends are not urban at all.
Right.
They have the sheen of being extremely local, quasi-historical, and then also kind of seeming to kind of come up sui generis right out of the soil of that. And so it's at a glance, it would seem,
autochthonous.
So these stories belong to this land, to this community, and you see these original stories being born on the spot.
So what are, if I may interrupt, what are the typical salient features that would identify these legends as belonging to the same genus? What's the list of items? Right.
So, I mean, that's what I'm kind of getting around to. And maybe our listeners are wondering, what does this have to do with the classics? Right. And so,
they're also wondering, when can I get back to Racco?
That's right. Well, aren't we all wondering that? I'm wondering that right now.
Or Rummy Cube.
Right. So when I started kind of thinking about this with the power of the internet, you can set these legends side by side.
Interesting.
And what struck me is that what these things that on the surface seem to be so original, so unique, and so localized actually share all kinds of things in common.
Okay.
And they really seem to be built on these very highly recognizable narrative archetypes. And I kind of reduce it to kind of three main things, is that there's usually some liminal time involved. Usually that's midnight. So
you need to define what liminality is in case someone hasn't listened to all the previous episodes.
So liminality, a state of being permanently in between.
In between two important things.
Yes.
Right?
And as such, unbounded. Right. And so a liminal time would be something like midnight, because midnight is neither today nor tomorrow, but it's also both. Right. And then also liminal spaces. What's striking is how many of these stories pop up around bridges. So bridges are over a river. It's a crossroads. So a bridge is both side in A and B, but it's neither.
And it's also not quite land and it's not quite water.
Exactly. Good. Right. Crossroads themselves, that center part of the crossroads in cultures around the world, is often associated with unbounded spirits and the restless dead and the practice of magic. And, so that's very common. Grave sites and cemeteries, by their nature as being kind of sites of transition between the living and the dead, are also kind of spiritually liminal.
Can we go back to the bridge for a minute?
Please.
Okay, so the Greeks had a particular word for this, you remember?
Yes.
Gephurismos.
Exactly.
Which means bridginess.
Bridginess, right.
It's the feeling you get when you're on the bridge.
Yeah.
Do you remember the feeling as a kid? Did your parents drive you over enormous bridges? and it was exciting. Again, this was in the day before there were screens everywhere.
Yeah.
Specifically, multiple screens within the vehicle, and so being somewhat desperate for entertainment, you know, my parents would say, "We're about to drive over an enormous bridge." This never happened to you?
No, it absolutely has.
And did you have the ritual that you were supposed to lift your feet up as you went over the bridge?
We had to hold our breath.
Yeah. Well, holding one's breath was for tunnels.
Was it for
which is another bridgy place.
Yes, right.
But our liminal place. But over bridges, we were supposed to raise our feet.
Is that right?
Not put them on the floor of the vehicle until we got to the other side.
Okay.
And now I wonder, what was the point of all this?
Yeah.
Was it just to entertain antsy kids?
I think that's part of it, but I think it's probably it's one of these things that is a response.
You calling my parents pagan?
They are inadvertent pagans. I mean, I think we do a lot of these silly things that we don't realize why we do them.
Yeah, it's another good band name, Accidental Pagans.
Right. That is not bad at all.
Thanks.
Right. No, but speaking of that, I remember, one of the family trips we would often do was we would go to Chicago.
Right.
We go around the bend and we go over the Chicago Skyway.
Right.
And at one point, there's this very large bridge.
Yes.
That kind of takes you down towards the Dan Ryan.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And I remember that being a bit frightening.
It's monumental.
Kid, right? You kind of look over the side and it plunges down.
Another great one is spanning the harbor down in the Tampa Bay, Clearwater. There's a huge bridge down there.
Okay.
And if you're going to hold your feet up as you cross that, you better be in pretty good shape.
You better have been doing your crunches.
Exactly. It's like a 10 or 15 minute. But that was exciting.
Yeah.
And bridginess, Gefuris Moss.
Yes, exactly right. So the Greeks recognized that. And so where I'm going with this is that I'm going to walk through a particular legend that I find fascinating.
Okay.
And then interpret along the lines of kind of these classical archetypes. And I want to say, I'm not making the argument that these types of American legends, you can draw a straight line between them and and Greek myths.
Okay.
I think you could draw several straight lines between these ideas and these kinds of archetypes that you find around the world. I think these are universal, almost kind of Jungian.
I was going to say, you're going to go Jungian on us?
Yes, Jungian or kind of Joseph Campbellian types of archetypes.
Okay.
So I'm not saying that this is uniquely Greek or classical. I'm just saying that I think we can use classical archetypes to better understand why these stories continue to pop up and why we continue to tell them and why we do weird things like lift our feet or hold our breath in particular places. I think this all comes from this same pot of soup.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can you give us a little bit of a hint, a look at the answer? What is the reason you think?
I'll get there. I don't know if I have a clear answer of that, but to get back to, you were talking about, what liminality. So I'd say liminal times,
right?
Liminal spaces,
right?
And then very often these stories will involve liminal creatures, which are kind of composite beasts.
Neither fish nor fowl.
Yes, right. And so they're made up of different kind of parts, or they're half human, half something.
Sasquatch.
Sasquatch
half
is
man, half ape.
Right? Exactly. And, so lots of the composite beasts from Greek mythology, the chimera, the sphinx, the minotaur, they all belong to this. And some would say that even things like
the phoenix,
the phoenix,
the burning bird,
right, or even to kind of contemporary, kind of more horror lens, something like a ventriloquist doll, which is,
you find those frightening?
Well, I think I do kind of, but simply because they become kind of a horror movie trope. In that they're there ostensibly for entertainment, but when you boil them down to their liminal qualities, is that we're supposed to kind of believe this thing that's clearly not human that's talking, but has been imbued with these human qualities, and that kind of puts it in that uncanny place.
How come people don't feel that way about cartoons? Because a cartoon is basically the same thing. It's a moving image. It's a moving picture. It's not human.
Yeah,
and yet it's a very persuasive facsimile of human society.
I would argue.
Aha! See, I just scored a philosophical point on your liminality.
I don't think you did. I think that.
Come on.
I think my answer would be that I think a cartoon is not like human enough to reach that uncanny valley. A doll, which has 3 dimensions, is tangible. Puts us more into that kind of that Freudian uncanny valley.
Are you going to say some more things about uncanny valley? That's where they grow the delicious vegetables, right? That go into the salad dressing.
Oh yeah, exactly right.
That's Hidden Valley.
Oh, that's Hidden Valley, the ranch, right? Oh, no, one of Freud's theories, which is called the uncanny valley, is about these very things.
Okay,
and so Freud would talk about how sometimes people find in the presence of twins. That's they find that kind of unsettling, or seeing like for a child to see a teacher at the store is out of the context in which the only context that you tend to experience that person can put you in the uncanny valley. But Freud would also talk about how things that are meant to look human but are also clearly not human, that kind of puts us on that kind of that edge of uneasiness. And in all of that, I think is wrapped up in this kind of this notion of liminality.
Okay.
Right. All right.
All right.
Right. So
where are we headed next, Jeff?
All right. So we're going to talk about a specific legend that I came into contact with, again, only through the power of the internets, because this is not a local Michigan legend, but it comes from kind of the middle of nowhere, Virginia.
Okay.
And there's a number of reasons that I like this legend, because I think it illustrates a lot of what we've been talking about, but it also has kind of a unique history to it, which I think also makes it very interesting. So just to clarify, the legends that we're talking about here are attached to specific locations. So I think a lot of people, when they think urban legends, they think of things like the mysterious hitchhiker.
I don't know that one.
You don't know that one. So where somebody picks up a hitchhiker along the way and drops them off, and they learn later that it was they recognized the photo in the paper of someone who had died like the week before. Or like the campfire legend of the hook. Did you ever?
No.
Okay, well,
I don't know anything, Jeff. Why would a dead person need to hitchhike?
Maybe I don't know. Maybe it's hard to get around as a dead person, right? I don't know. Maybe they're
what's the legend of the hook? Is this a violent thing? Or?
Without going into it, it's a famous campfire legend where there's a killer on the loose, and he's got a hook for a hand, and then and someone has a strange encounter, and that they don't quite understand, but they get home and they look on their door handle, and as they drove away, the hook is hanging there. So
I see.
All right, so that was.
So it didn't involve a crocodile that swallowed a clock or anything.
No, nothing like that.
Okay.
A different hook, right?
All right.
That was a legend that my dad loved to tell when we were camping. Yes, right.
But this is going to be. Can I reveal the name?
Yes, please.
This is the Bunnyman Bridge.
Yes, the legend of Bunnyman Bridge.
Okay.
And the murderous Bunnyman.
Should we insert here the laugh track, maybe?
That wouldn't be bad, right?
Okay.
Or maybe some ominous, violins.
We'll see what Mishka can do.
It sounds good. One of the striking, unique things about the legend of the Bunnyman is that we can actually pinpoint its origin.
Okay.
So, usually one of the rules of an urban legend is that if you try to trace it back to where it came from, you get lost in the fog. And so, my cousin's friends, roommates, blah, 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 blah,
right.
They swear it happened, but you can never figure it out.
But this one we can carbon date.
We can. Right. And so there's a newspaper record of these events. And it goes something like this. And so we're on October 19th of 1970.
Oh, that is very specific.
Right. So less than a month before I was born.
Wow. Coincidence?
Yep. Yeah, I don't think so. Right.
First the Bunnyman and then the Sasquatch is born.
Right. So what happened is there was a young couple that was out on the roads, and they late at night, near midnight probably, and they were parking alongside the road in Burke, Virginia, which is today is kind of part of the urban sprawl of D.C.
Okay.
But this was still fairly rural back in 1970. And as they were sitting in the car, a guy emerged from the woods dressed head to toe in a bunny suit.
Okay.
And he had a hatchet in his hand.
Oh, no.
Yes. And the couple froze because it was so bizarre. And the Bunnyman, the guy in the bunny suit, came up to the passenger side window where the young lady was sitting and said something like, "This is private property. You don't belong here. You need to get out of here. You need to get out of here now." And before they could do anything or react, he threw the hatchet through the passenger side window. The glass shattered. Miraculously, nobody was hurt. And it landed at the foot of the young girl, and the guy ran off into the woods.
The Bunnyman
suit guy ran off into the woods.
Or was it a real bunny?
No, it was a guy in a bunny suit.
Okay.
Right. Who said these words and threw the hatchet.
What level of credulity do you want, or incredulity do you want me to have for this legend?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. So the next day, this young man and the woman, they went to the police department to tell this story.
Yes.
And they actually gave them the hatchet. Which is still...
The police then buried it?
No, they put it in a plaque and it's on their wall. Nice, right. So you can find pictures online of the hatchet of the Bunnyman on the wall of the police department still to this day in Virginia.
That is odd.
Right. And so the police looked into it, asked some questions, and the investigation really went nowhere. They couldn't find anything else. Until about 10 days later...
They didn't, if I may interrupt,
yes.
They didn't have a police artist sketch man in bunny suit and see if anything could be... drummed up?
If they did, I'd never read anything about that.
Okay.
Right? So I don't know how far like a composite sketch of the Bunnyman would have gone. But 10 days later, October 29th, we're getting very close to Halloween.
Okay.
In that same general area, there was an apartment complex going up. And there had been some vandalism from the local kids. And so there was a security guard who was hired to walk through the site with a flashlight just to make sure no shenanigans were going on. And on this particular
Local
night,
kids and their shenanigans.
Exactly, right. And so he's walking along, the security guard, middle of the night, and in the beam of his flashlight on the porch of one of these unfinished apartment buildings, there stands a guy head to toe in a bunny suit. And this time he has an axe in his hand. And he stands there and
he took it up a notch.
He yells at the security guard, same kind of thing. He says, "This is private property. You don't belong here. You need to leave right now."
Huh.
And the security guard is frozen by the oddity of the situation. And the Bunnyman turned around and ran off into the woods, never to be seen or heard from again.
I thought he was going to appear again, but this time driving a tank or something.
Right. You'd expect that to be the next turn of the wheel.
Or a lance, for jousting.
Right. So, but he never shows up again.
Huh.
The story makes its way into the police blotter, into the local newspapers, and people are on the lookout for the guy in the bunny suit, but nobody's ever identified with this. But there are these two separate kind of confirmed experiences with the same guy who says the same thing.
Presumably the same guy.
Well, it would be the same guy, different guys saying the exact same thing.
Okay,
both with
I agree.
Bladed, wooden handled weapons, right?
Fair.
Right. So now what happens next is this is where it kind of becomes more amorphous.
Okay.
And so over time, over the next decade, the story seems to kind of take on a life of its own, and it moves. And it moves from the kind of the more suburban, urban area of Burke, and it moves inland to tiny Clifton, Virginia, which at the last census had a population of 282 people.
That's pretty small, or 281.
Right.
And one bunny man.
Right. And then the story becomes something quite different. And as with urban legends, there's various versions of it. But the story goes here is that way back in the early 20th century, there was a mental institution in that general area, and they had to transfer a bunch of the mental patients from one institution to another. As they loaded them up on one of these, very early sputtering trucks,
right,
from the 1910s or 1920s, and they're moving along, and somewhere in the area of Clifton, Virginia, truck hits a bump, it tips over, and wouldn't you know it, all of the crazy mental patients escape and they scatter into the woods.
Oh, no.
Right? And over the next few days, with the help of the authorities, they round up all of them except that one that they never find. And lo and behold, in around the area of this train trestle bridge, now known as Bunnyman Bridge, which is really a tunnel. There's like a pedestrian tunnel which goes under a train trestle. Mm-hmm. So we have kind of a crossroads, but now it's train tracks and kind of a tunnel.
Liminal spot.
Yes. They start finding skinned carcasses of rabbits, and sometimes being hung by ropes.
Now, this is getting really weird.
It
Jeff.
is getting very weird. That's kind of the whole point of this,
okay,
right?
I'm feeling a little liminal, frankly.
Yes. And then people start having sightings of this mental patient, though they quickly realize was not actually, he was more than a mental patient. He was some kind of weird genetic experiment where he was turned into half bunny, half man.
This part's made up.
Well, this part, of course, is made up.
Okay.
Right? But it seems to have clearly
my credulity's pretty high right now.
Right. No,
I need someone's hand to hold.
I'm not asking you to believe the story. That's not the point, right? And so since then, late 70s, 1980s, this train trestle tunnel and bridge has been known as Bunnyman Bridge. And it has become a haunt for the local kids to go out and kind of test their courage,
their mettle,
and to go down there into that tunnel at midnight and stay as quiet as they can,
confront the bunny man,
and listen for the soft footfalls of the bunny man. Who, if you are very unlucky, he will show up with his axe and he will come after you. Right. So
you've been there, I assume.
No, I haven't.
No,
I am dying to go to the Bunnyman
I bet.
Bridge, right?
That just has you all over it.
Exactly. There's got to be some kind of humanities grant that would fund my travel to Bunnyman Bridge.
National Endowment for Liminality.
Right. Exactly. So we have the liminal time.
Yeah.
Where you go out at midnight to do this.
Right.
You have the liminal place, the bridge, the tunnel, the crossroads. And you have the liminal creature, the part bunny, part man. And so you have all of those places, those things in place for the perfect combination for an urban legend. Yes.
It's funny that there was never any bunny as a chimera in antiquity.
No.
It's interesting that you've got birds, you have goats,
You have snakes.
you have lions, you have chickens, you have women. They're all combined in men as a horse and bull.
Yeah.
But never a bunny.
Never a bunny.
It seems to me that there aren't any rodents, are there, that are chimeric animals?
No, I don't think there are.
Maybe they were just considered cuddly even in antiquity?
Yeah. Quite possibly.
I don't find them especially cuddly, but a lot of people do.
Right. But I think that's one of the things that lends horror to the story. I think that's maybe more of a kind of a modern horror concept. Did you ever read any Stephen King?
Nope.
No, never was that never your bag?
Nope.
Okay. But one of the things that Stephen
I
King...
scare too easily, Jeff.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'd probably die if I read some true horror.
Got you. Well, I mean, all right. But one of the things that King is famous for is that a lot of his horror is drawn from taking something that is on the face of it innocent.
Yeah.
And you tweak it just a little bit.
Yeah.
And it becomes awful. And so a bunny, which should be cute and cuddly
Right.
and fuzzy, and you twist it in a way, and now you've turned it into something quite the opposite.
It's a bestia amoina.
Yes.
A creature that's just a little too nice.
Little too
Some
nice.
secret danger lurks within.
Right.
And speaking of a secret lurking danger,
Oh, no.
it's time for the ads.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by the great people at Ratio Coffee. Ratio Coffee, how long have they been around, Dave?
A little more than a decade.
A little more decade, right? But in that decade, they have produced these wonderful machines, the Ratio 6 and the Ratio 8, that are works of art, beautiful to look at. They will outclass everything on your kitchen counter, and they just produce day after day the perfect cup of coffee. Dave,
Absolutely.
I believe you have a limerick that you've written?
I do. Yes,
Okay.
I wrote a limerick for this occasion.
All right.
You were here as it was done. You
Yes.
witnessed it, right?
Exactly.
Okay, here it goes. These limericks are getting quite trite, as bland as a wall-painted white. But when Ratio makes coffee, all hats, they will doffy, for Ratio doth brew and pour right.
Not bad. Not bad for
Do you like the doffy?
Doffy. I like Doffy. I'm going to use that. But the fact that you cranked that out in about 30 seconds is quite impressive.
Thanks. Did you notice how I slipped a doth in the fifth line?
I missed the doth.
For Ratio doth brew and pour right.
Not bad.
And the doth gives it a little bit of grandeur.
Loftiness.
Yes, loftiness.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's say the listeners, just for the sake of argument, nominis gratia, they don't simply want to hear bad limericks. They also want to drink good coffee.
Yeah.
What might they do, Jeff?
They might, and I would encourage them to absolutely do so, is to go to ratiocoffee.com. That's RATIO coffee.com, where they will find these wonderful machines along with all kinds of other coffee accoutrements.
That's right.
Right? But I recommend if you are into coffee, if coffee is your thing, more than just kind of a morning ritual, but you want to invest in your coffee present and future, to consider getting one of these wonderful machines, the 6 and the 8. You and I both have the 8.
Yes, you graduated from the 6.
And that was a wonderful machine coming down the pike. I believe early next year will be the Ratio 4.
Yes, coming across the bridge, you might say. It's in kind of a liminal spot right now.
Okay, right.
We've seen some shots. There's a prototype. I've seen, if you go to ratiocoffee.com/FOUR, you can look at, some images and videos of the prototype, but it's not really finished yet. It's going to be released sometime in early 2024.
Okay, excellent. I can't wait to get the details on that and
That's right.
and to
And
offer that.
I think we'll give one away for sure.
Fantastic. Yeah. Yep.
I was trying to convince Mark maybe to do a special branding of the Ratio 4.
Yeah.
Deface the beauty of the machine by putting some no brackish tang stickers on it or something
yeah.
like that.
How could he say no?
Maybe like what's the ad nauseum color? Kind of a vomity pink.
A vomity pink, yes.
Maybe make one
orangish, yes. Right. Yeah.
Puce, one in that color.
Oh, I can't imagine he wouldn't go for it. Right. So, listeners, do yourself a favor. Check out ratiocoffee.com today. And if you want one of these wonderful machines, use our coupon code, which this month is ANCO5R.
And the R stands for?
What is it?
Revolutionary.
Excellent.
Because it will revolutionize your coffee experience.
Yes, it will. And it will also get you 15% off your order.
That's right. Check it out. This episode is also brought to you by the great folks at Hackett Publishing. Now, Hackett has offices in Indianapolis, Indiana, and Cambridge, Massachusetts, but one need not drive through the the great American landscape littered with urban legends to these locations in order to get good books.
No.
You can use the internet.
Yes, you can.
You can go to hackett-publishing.com, HACKETT, check out their vast selection of classical translations and really works from all areas of human knowledge and interest, or nearly so.
It's true.
East Asian studies, modern philosophy, aesthetics,
Islamic studies,
South American studies, a really broad smorgasbord of things from which to choose.
Yes, indeed. Yes. And if you have, if you made it through our Aeneid series, we relied heavily on Stanley Lombardo's translation of the Aeneid. We've used prose and poetry translations, and all of these are coming from Hackett.
The Deborah Roberts translation of the Prometheus Bound.
That's right.
Which is a brilliant translation.
More recently, really great stuff. And Hackett is dedicated to bringing quality translations to the public at a very affordable price. And they're one of these great companies that is, as in a phrase we like to use, they are keeping the flame alive.
That's correct. They support high quality literature at a very affordable price. So, listener, if you want to do two things, you want to support this podcast, we would be very grateful for that kind of support. And if you want to add to your own collection of good things to read, go to hackettpublishing.com, check out their selection, drop a couple of titles into your grocery basket, and when you get to the checkout, what do they need to do, Jeff?
Then they will type in this coupon code. That would be AN2023.
And what will they get for their efforts?
They will get two wonderful things. They will get 20% off their entire order and free shipping.
Free shipping?
That's huge.
Check it out. All right, Jeff, as we get back into the meat of this episode, where are we headed next?
Well, I'm guessing that maybe our listeners are still wondering, okay, that's great, Jeff, your weirdo story about the Bunnyman, but again, what is this doing on a classical podcast?
I have to say that I was wondering that too.
Okay, well, let's clear
I was a little bit of a doubting Dave.
All right. So in this second half, I want to kind of draw some parallels between these expressions of liminality in the Bunnyman story, and with similar kinds of things that we see in the classical world. And so one of the main things is that you find, not just in the ancient classical world, but in cultures all around the world. Like I would argue this is a universal thing, is that cultures have anxiety about unbounded places. Right? And I would think that I would argue that at some level, the reason that these stories still pop up around bridges and crossroads and graveyards and such is that we still have these anxieties. And there's something kind of deeply human about that. And so we tell these stories that stick, that are kind of magnetically drawn to these places. So we continue to do these very same things, but I think in a way that is much less self-aware than it happened for the ancients. And so I get to use classical ancient culture as a touch point. Both the Greeks and the Romans had anxieties about unbounded places, gates, thresholds, entrances to houses, to cities, to crossroads, and they marked these places in very distinctive ways, and in ways that I think that strike a lot of modern viewers as very odd and strange and weird. Okay, right, and so. The Greeks and Romans would often place at a crossroads, at thresholds, what we would call a herm. So a statue, kind of a form of the god Hermes, but it would be on the front of it would be phallic imagery. And
we did an episode about the Alcibiades and the Sicilian expedition.
Yes,
right. I don't remember the name of that episode. Some crazy but somewhat clever title that you came up with.
Was it mine? You're gonna put this on me, right?
No.
Right. But of course, one of the things that he was accused of was drunkenly going around and
defacing all of them,
defacing all of the herms, right? And this was something that the city took very, very seriously.
And they were mile markers too.
Right. But they were also seen as things that are kind of spiritually protecting these areas, and these things that at a glance to the modern eye, they seem sexual, they seem obscene,
and because they have human genitalia,
right. But because of that, I think we often misunderstand their purpose.
Okay,
and this is true. This wasn't just the Greeks. You find this all over the world. In my religions class that I teach, it's striking is how many cultures place phallic imagery at these points of transition.
Now, if I may interrupt, do you have a category in your thinking about this the category of superstition?
What are you getting at? I'm not quite following where you...
Is there a category for superstition? The notion of the commonality of all of this is born out of an ignorance about the way the universe actually works. That in fact death is not a liminal space. You know, the body laying there is no longer alive.
Yeah.
If there is a soul, as I believe, then the soul is somewhere else.
Right.
But the unease about it is because of an ignorance about the truth of some of these things.
Yeah.
Not stating that we could, on this side of, you know, the next life, have full knowledge of all of these things.
Right.
But we could still have true knowledge.
Yes.
And so what connects a lot of these is what would have been called by many superstition.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. I mean, at the same time, I would also say that I think humans around the world still enact and recognize or do these things in spite of perhaps claiming true knowledge or kind of, oh, we know this is all ridiculous. Well, that all may be well and true, but we humans still do it.
I see.
Right? So I think I would say yes.
So you're making more of a realistic claim.
Yeah, and again, I'm not saying that there's any kind of, you know, historical truth in these liminal creatures, right? Or the truth in that unbounded spirits gather at unbounded places.
Right.
I say yes. There's definitely a superstitious aspect to this that I would say this is not real.
It's inaccurate.
But at the same time, I am completely fascinated by the fact that these are universal notions, right? And
do you know why you're fascinated by it?
Because I don't fully understand it.
Okay.
Right. And so it's something that, you know, that our post-Enlightenment scientific, knowledge has not eradicated. Right. Or even a Western Judeo-Christian, differing view on notions of death and the soul and the afterlife have eradicated. And so this still goes on. And,
so that's the point where, right?
Yes.
You probably sense there was a theological angle behind this, but
yeah.
That's the point where, you know, I agree with you. So someone who is a professing Christian could recognize this as superstition.
Yes.
And yet find themselves in some ways unable to avoid falling into these kinds of ideas. Is that kind of your point?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think there is kind of this is a way that humans for millennia have understood the world.
Right.
Right. And I think often unquestioningly.
Right.
Particularly from a modern point of view. So when I talk about this in my class, I impress it upon my students is that like when the Greeks put a herm at a crossroads, they knew exactly what they were doing. This idea that the obscenity of the image, the Greeks believed, would ward off. Apotropaic, right? Whereas when we have adolescent kids coming up with stories that glue themselves to crossroads, thresholds, and bridges, we don't know why that is. I think the ancient Greeks and Romans would know exactly why that is.
I see.
And so that's, I think that we've kind of, I find it fascinating kind of as an example of kind of lost knowledge, right? And so, and by uncovering some of these archetypal roots, we might not fully explain why this is happening, but we can certainly make a better case for kind of where these ideas are coming from.
Okay.
All right.
You're going to enumerate some examples now?
Yeah. And so if you, in the classical world, not only the herm at the crossroads, if you were to go to Pompeii and Ostia, two of the, the great archaeological excavations in the classical world, you'll find phallic imagery in the mosaics at the threshold of a house,
right?
And it's there to protect the in between place.
You're going to mention Janus.
Janus, the two-headed Roman god, placed at the gates of the forum and the gates of the city. The heads looking in both ways. He is a liminal deity. He is the god of the doorway.
He is the liminal deity, isn't he?
Yeah, right. From his name comes, January and janitor and the word for door and for entrance and and the like. And so this is stuff that, if you went back in antiquity, this wasn't just these superstitions that the rubes and the rednecks, bumpkins believed, but you find this in the downtown forum of Rome. This was a widely kind of accepted way of kind of understanding kind of how the world works physically and spiritually.
Okay, so moving into Americana.
Yeah.
You've got the famous guitarist here.
Right. Robert Johnson.
Not Scott Van Zandt, but Robert Johnson.
Right, who was a real person.
Oh, yes. You can listen to his recordings.
Exactly, right. But he's most famous for this legend that as a young man, he went down to the crossroads at midnight, and it's there that he sold his soul to the devil.
In exchange for
playing the blues like nobody else could.
Right.
And then he dies under kind of violent, mysterious circumstances at age 27, and that sets the template for, have you heard about the 27 Club?
Yes.
So like
dying young.
Janis Joplin, Kurt Cobain, Jim Morrison, Amy Winehouse, they all die at 27.
Right.
And this is sometimes kind of related, well, that's the curse of Robert Johnson.
What about places like Devil's Gulch, Devil's Tower?
Yeah, if you go...
Devil's Peak.
If you look at kind of forlorn places in the American landscape.
In the West in particular.
When you kind of get out and where you get the wide open spaces and there's a lot more room between towns, it's really quite striking of how the word devil is applied to Devil's Gulch, Devil's Tower, Devil's River.
Devil's Kleenex.
Right, and because if it's in the liminal place, that's where you're going to meet the spiritual danger.
Right, there's got to be something fishy going on there.
Right. And so even like with Robert Johnson, the Crossroads, people have connected that it's a Southern American legend, but it has its roots in West African folklore, where at the crossroads you don't meet the devil, but you meet this spirit called Legba. And if you can trick Legba, then he'll give you some kind of gift in exchange for something like he will have your life when it's over. And so then that becomes kind of loosely kind of Christianized into Legba becomes the devil at the crossroads. Yeah.
Well, a liminal spot from classical antiquity where this danger occurs as well, of course, is the crossroads between Corinth and Thebes for Oedipus.
For Oedipus, right. That's where kind of the first part of the horrible oracle comes true. It's where he kills his father.
That's correct. So we've talked about the ventriloquist. What about the goat man at Old Alton Bridge?
Right. So these liminal creatures are all over American urban legends. So it's not just the Bunnyman. There's a number of goat men out there. And so on a road trip that I did with my family a couple of summers ago, I did get to some of these places. Like we didn't have time to go as far east as Clifton, Virginia.
Is this where famously Beck said that's a tub of crock?
That was much earlier in our relationship. Right. But we went to, there is a famous goatman in an unfortunately named part of Louisville called Pope Lick.
Okay.
And there's the Pope Lick goatman, which is, if you drive under the train trestle bridge at midnight, the goatman will jump off and land upon your car and drag you out and drag you down into the nether regions.
I don't want that.
No. And then in Denton, Texas.
No, I can understand the goat man.
Yeah.
Because that is a classical trope through and through.
Sure.
But the bunny man is not.
No, but I think the bunny man is a growth on things like the goat man or like the figure of Pan.
Okay.
Right? And if you think about Pan, why is Pan half goat, half man? Well, I mean, he's a liminal creature. He dwells in the forest. He's the literal panic that comes upon you.
Yes, the traditional interpretation is the famous fertility of goats. That's why.
Oh, that's why he's the goat man?
No, it's why goats are associated with so many deities.
Oh,
the traditional explanation is goats are fantastically fertile. They can reproduce, more than pretty much any other farm animal.
Right.
So they're a natural selection they're a natural one to choose for. Let's associate supernatural powers. With that creature.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But sure, certainly, a figure like Pan sets the template for the Pope Lick goat man. Or, there's the goat man at the old Denton Bridge in Denton, Texas, Old Alton Bridge in Denton, Texas. And here, teenagers will drive their cars up to the edge of the bridge at midnight. And what you're supposed to do is you click your brights 3 times.
Really?
And then everybody shuts up. And what you're listening for is the clatter of hooves on the wooden bridge coming towards you across the other side. And if you look online, you have these reports. I swear I saw 2 glowing red eyes.
Yeah.
And
I'm getting a little goat man fatigue, frankly.
Really? You've had enough of that?
I've had enough.
Right. But yeah, I think you could make connections between those kinds of figures and some of the creatures that we've mentioned, like the Sphinx, like the Chimera, like the Centaur, the Minotaur. I think they all stem from the same kind of place, right? And it's rare to find a composite animal that is friendly to humans.
Yes.
Right? We've talked about centaurs, right? With the exception of Chiron.
Right.
Centaurs
They're
are
all dangerous.
dangerous and violent.
Lecherous.
Right.
Drunks.
Exactly. Right. So I could go on and on and on.
Well, I think we have to, cross over the threshold here and
Okay.
put this episode to rest.
Okay, exactly. I wanted to say one last thing,
All right.
if I may, and this is actually the thing that I find most fascinating.
This is the last time you can use the word liminal for the next 30 episodes.
All right.
I'm kidding.
Okay. You might have to hold me to that because I might need to be kind of reined in. Right. So, but the aspect of this I find the most fascinating is this notion of the legend trip.
Okay.
And that is when these stories stop becoming stories. And it's when usually adolescent kids don't just tell the story or know the story. They go and kind of test the story. And so you go to the location, and like with the Black Angel, there's some kind of physical ritual that you run around it 3 times. And so there's a physical enactment of the story where the legend tripper becomes part of the story.
Okay.
And that's really fascinating because an obvious question is, well, why do that? It's often been written off as just kind of being, it's just kids doing kid stuff.
Well, I mean, most of these examples have been adolescents.
Yes.
Older adults don't do that.
Right.
That's not a coincidence, is it?
No, because adolescence is a liminal time in life.
Okay.
Right? So it's 13, 14, and 15-year-old kids doing this. They're no longer kids, but they're not adults yet. And so even the liminal time of their own life is kind of reflected in this. And I don't think that's a coincidence at all. And so, kind of the thesis that I've been playing around with is, well, why exactly is that? And like I said, it's often been dismissed as just, and it's very often boys doing this. Girls tend not to do this as much as boys
because they have more sense. Is that why?
Well, I mean, that's been offered,
hypothesized,
right? But boys, tend to be more risk taking, right? And this has that element to it. But the thesis that I really like is what's really happening is that these are kind of do-it-yourself coming-of-age rituals. And I've read some kind of writing on this that suggests that as Western society kind of becomes more and more secularized, these kind of accepted rituals of adulthood, be they religious or even kind of embedded in kind of community secular rites, as those are really becoming rarer, that leaves a vacuum. And so the reason that young boys in particular do these things, they don't realize that what they're doing, but they are kind of creating coming of age rituals, testing their courage and becoming adults on their own, because there aren't recognized signposts in the culture that say you're a man now.
They have to do it themselves.
They do themselves. And so it's in the same way, like in Jewish culture, a bar or bat mitzvah, where the culture says you are a woman now, you are a man now. Mm-hmm. If that's absent, that doesn't mean the need for that is absent.
Yep.
I think that's a very attractive thesis that just like we don't as a culture generally understand why these stories stick to bridges, or why there is this anxiety, what we call liminal spaces. Nobody thinks about this. In the same way, nobody thinks about why these kids are doing what they're doing. And but if you connect it to come-of-age rituals around the world and throughout the millennia of history, there have always been rituals for young boys and young girls to cross that threshold into adulthood. And I think this just falls into that very same pattern. It's just the kids are doing it themselves. Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
That seems like a good place to end.
All right. So we are up against it.
That's right.
All right.
Got to say thank you to some folks.
Yes.
We want to thank Mishka for putting this together so well, our wonderful sound engineer, Scott Van Zen and Ken Tamplin for the music, the intro and outro music. Nothing creepy about those arpeggios, I don't think, those blues.
That's just straight up beautiful.
There's no liminality there, right?
No, not that I recognize.
Okay,
right?
very good.
Yes. Dave, you want to say something about the Moss method before we get out of here?
Oh, sure. Let's do that. So I've developed a program for learning Greek to take you from neophyte to erudite.
Indeed.
It's had some success recently, for which I'm grateful. Our Black Friday Cyber Monday sale did quite well.
Excellent.
We'll probably have a New Year's sale as well. We want the study of Greek to go from psi to shining psi.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
And so you go to mossmethod.com, check out some of my many free lessons. I was just taking count the other day, well over 2,000 now, Greek and Latin lessons for free. And if you want to take the fee-based course, it's a very good value, mossmethod.com. Check it out. I have one for Latin also, latinperdiem.com, using Hans Orberg's famous book. We're working on Unit 2. It's in production, so that's going to be coming out soon as well.
Fantastic. Excellent. Hey, if you want a shout out, if you got an idea for an episode, you got a question, you have a critique, go ahead and write to us. You can write to Dave at dave@adnauseum.com. Don't forget that V.
Or you can write to Jeff at adnauseum.com. Don't forget the V in nauseum.
Yes.
You can also check out our website and the adnauseum.com. Check out the Lurch with Merch section and get yourself a nice Quai Nocent Docent Ad Nauseum t-shirt or hat.
Perfect for the holidays.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah. Speaking of the holidays,
Yes.
I think we're going to do a holiday episode coming up here.
Yeah, next week? Or
maybe,
Okay.
I don't know, kind of next week or maybe delay.
All right.
But we'd like to keep it TBD, to be determined
Sounds
in terms of where we're headed next.
Excellent. And Dave, I believe you have our gustatory parting shot.
Yes, but this one's not humorous.
it's
Unfortunately, this is all I could find, but I'd like to pick it apart a little bit. And maybe if we pick it apart, we'll find some humor buried within it.
Okay.
So this is by a woman named B. Wilson. And we did have a funny quote from her previously.
We did?
Yes.
Okay.
B. Wilson from her book First Bite, How We Learn to Eat. And she says, the problem with lunchboxes is the problem with the way we feed children in general. Parents trust that anything they place in this magical box will be good for the child because it comes with their love. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can you relate to this?
Yes.
You can?
I am the lunch packer in
You're the lunchbox packer.
in our household, right.
Do your kids have a box that's reusable, or do they have a little paper baggie?
I have one that uses a paper bag, and the other two have like one of those, the ones that you kind of put a cool pack in.
It zips up, maybe
Yeah.
it's vinyl or something?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Did you have an actual lunchbox as a kid?
I did.
I did too. What was yours?
My favorite one was the one with all the NFL helmets on the front of it.
That's pretty sweet.
Yes.
I had a Mickey Mouse
Okay.
lunchbox.
Not bad.
That when you open it up, there was a tiny little thermos on the inside,
I remember that.
which had a cup for soup.
Yes, right.
But one of my friends, we'll call him Brian because that's his name, he had the Dukes of Hazzard lunchbox with the thermos built inside and so forth. And
man.
I was struggling with the sin of envy when
I bet.
when I saw that.
That's
but
huge.
this part about parents trust that anything they place in this magical box will be good for the child.
Yeah.
That was not my experience at all.
No, not-
My parents just, we'll put in there whatever we can get ready in time for them to eat.
Exactly.
Now, sometimes there were some great surprises, like a slice of pie or something really delicious.
Yeah.
But I don't think they believed there was any magic involved. It was very utilitarian.
Oh, yes, exactly.
Kids got to eat. Put something in the box.
Exactly. As the lunch packer in my house, that's how I
Is that
see
how it
it.
works?
It is how it works, right?
Yeah.
So I never think that there's anything kind of magical.
Or, oh, this must be good for them because I put it in the box.
Right. So
I can't relate, B.
I take issue with B here.
Yeah. But, you're taking in the classics and you are...
You're keeping them down.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.